Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror. I am your host, Kevin L. Powers. I'm also the owner and operator of Something Wicked Entertainment and Events, and welcome to this podcast. Now, today is Valentine's Day, and we're giving you a special episode coming from us to you, and we don't normally celebrate Valentine's here. Why should we, unless somebody is getting killed, murdered, or disappearing, as in this movie that we're going to be talking about today. Just to give you a little bit of information about the show, if you've never been here before, what we do is we take a movie that is either a classic, modern day film from different eras, and we speak candidly about them. And we actually say some kind of critical analysis, if you will. Some of us are more critical than others. Whether the film is a popular film, an infamous film, or just a film that we believe has been forgotten. Each episode is designed to feature one film. So if you are new to the podcast, make sure to check out all of our previous episodes, as our previous episodes are decided upon different films out there from different genres and different eras. So with this year in Valentine's Day, we are going to talk about Picnic in Hanging Rock from 1975. And to talk to us with this film is Dave Watkins, who is a frequent guest on the show. Thank you, Dave.
Right on. Yeah. It's actually Picnic at Hanging Rock.
What did I say?
So it doesn't matter. It's like one word difference. I just don't want to confuse anybody. They might think we're talking about some other movie.
Picnic at Hanging Rock. Well, yeah, there's that one, and then there's the remake / miniseries.
Right. Yeah, which I've seen both of them. I thought the miniseries was pretty well done. I kind of prefer the original movie to the miniseries, but the miniseries actually makes it big. It basically takes every character and then make them a little bit bigger. You see more of the backstory of every character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I kind of noticed that when I rewatched this version. I was kind of like, there's a lot of characters that you don't get all that backstory about. And it could be because it's been a few years since I've seen the original, but then I watched the miniseries and really enjoyed it. I love this version of the film too, because we'll get into a lot about that, but one of the great things about this is Peter Weir is a phenomenal director who's done some great films since this film, and his eye, right, when he was doing this film, like, this is a beautifully shot film. The music is fucking pitch perfect for the tone of the movie and everything like that. I mean, this is like a really great movie. So I'm glad we're talking about this, even though this, it being one of the few films that we've talked about that is not full of horror, gore, and everything else.
Yeah, it's not even necessarily considered a horror film. I would think that this would be classified as a historical fiction, a gothic mystery. Yeah, but it does have some supernatural elements that lean towards horror, that some of them aren't explained, or it could be not even really there, but I think they're there myself.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah, Peter Weir, and this is an Australian film. I mean, it's based on an Australian novel. But Peter Weir, the other films you're talking about, so here's a few of his films, like The Year of Living Dangerously, that starred Mel Gibson, and it had Linda Hunt in it playing like a man. I think she won like Best Supporting Actress.
Yeah, but, I think so too.
Which kind of interesting. And she pulled it off. I was convinced by it, but. What did you think? Were you convinced when you saw her doing it?
I was. The thing is, I saw that one later in life, and I went back to rewatch it because I hadn't seen that one, and I knew who she was already. So
right. Well, I knew it already. I guess it's been a long time since I've seen it. It might not be as convincing now, but so I guess the films that most people would know would be like Witness with Harrison Ford, Dead Poets Society, and The Truman Show.
Yeah.
And Master and Commander. Those are the ones he's done. Those are the ones that really stood out to me as fairly well known. But he's an Australian filmmaker, and he started in Australia, and he went kind of mainstream Hollywood for a little while.
Yeah, but all the movies you just mentioned I think are absolutely great films. So
yeah, certainly they certainly are. Yeah.
I could talk about each one of those films. Are all great movies, and so it was really weird for me because I had seen all those beforehand, and then I went back when I realized who he was to watch this film. So I did not see this film. I wasn't even born when this film originally came out in 75.
Yeah, 75. Yeah.
So this is even older for me. So I caught this one really, really later after I realized who the director was, and I went back and watched it because of that. If it wasn't for him, I don't know if I would have gone back to rewatch this film. This would just have been a film
Yeah.
that I may or may not have heard about, and that's about
Yeah.
it. I don't know.
I think what drew my attention to it was it was released as a Criterion release. I
Mm.
think I was just kind of looking into some other Criterion releases, and I just happened to see it on eBay, and I got a good price on it. And it was like a pretty good set, so I was like, I'm gonna check this thing out. But it was that was a while back, maybe a few years ago. But since then the miniseries came out, and but it was it's a fairly impressive film in general, and there's a I guess we should talk about what does happen in the plot. And one thing the plot kind of reminds me of, and I'm a huge Twin Peaks fan, and I could see a lot of parallels between, especially the Laura Palmer mystery in Twin Peaks and what happens in this film. And David Lynch with Twin Peaks, the studio behind Twin Peaks made him reveal who the killer was during the series. He never wanted to reveal it, and he basically wanted to focus on there was a mystery, and then how the mystery affected everyone in the town.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of what he wanted to do, and he wanted to make new mysteries but it was more about people's reaction to the mystery. And he said he called the mystery the Golden Goose, and it was laying golden eggs, and then the network decided to kill the Golden Goose. But unlike what happened to Twin Peaks, which it did recover kind of after that, but it took a long time. But what instead of they don't reveal the secret of the mystery in the film or the book, but there is another chapter of the book that was released after the author's death that reveals
Oh,
what happened, which I do know what happens in that, but at the same time, some people are suspicious of it. They say the writing doesn't seem the same, and
oh, gotcha.
but at the same time, it's a draft form where the novel is edited by an editor, and so it's a draft form, so that might make for the discrepancies between the book and the ending. But I'll eventually
Interesting.
I'll eventually talk about that alternate ending later on, but I want to talk about everything else first.
Yeah,
Saying
yeah. I didn't realize that the last chapter that was missing, because we talked about this before the show, was actually them revealing kind of if there was a supernatural element or how everything unfolded. I think the way that the film is presented, I think it leads for like a mystery, like you said. There are certain mysteries in certain movies and certain shows that are better left untold, like Twin Peaks or even Lost, which when they started solving mysteries, it started to get less interesting.
right, but it's hard though because you do have the audience wanting the mystery solved, and really, if you watch Twin Peaks, the best episodes of that show are the episodes leading up to when the mystery is finally solved. They're very exciting. They're some of the most well written stuff I've seen, and it's very much similar to the way it changed television landscape anyway. But
Mhm.
but revealing the killer, then after the killer's revealed, there's a slump in this show up until the very last episode. Then it was canceled. But then but it kind of messed the show up. But at the same time, it made some very great episodes in the middle of the
Leading up.
second season. But then the second half of the second season really suffered because the mystery was over.
Yeah, well, the main mystery was over, and then audiences kind of drifted away, and that and I believe that that's a really hard thing to juggle for a television show, much less a feature length film. With this one, the mystery comes, I think, to the girls disappear about 30-40 minutes into the film.
Yeah, at the very end, I guess we should talk about what does happen in the film. For basically at 40 minutes, but they disappear a little bit before that. But 40 minutes is when they're revealed to be gone, and they couldn't find them. So I guess the first thing would be this. is considered a Valentine's Day film. Now it all happens. The first 40 minutes are Valentine's Day. Yeah. As far as that, how that's incorporated, what did you think about that leading up into
Well, the
it?
thing is that the movie opens with all the girls at the Appleyards College. Yeah, I didn't realize it was a college till I actually looked at it. It says college. I was like, I don't know if they look. They sound like college kids, but okay. But
I've always considered it kind of a girls' school.
Yeah, it's a girls' school. It's a girls' school college, so it's like kind of weird. But it is 1900,
right?
It is 1900. It is a girls' school, and it is Valentine's Day. So it opens with the girls waking up and reading the I'm assuming old Valentines and new Valentines to each other. Where exactly these Valentines come from, other than the one that is told by two of the main characters, Miranda and Sarah, I don't know, because there's no men near this all-girls school. But we are told that Sarah has written a Valentine to Miranda, who, as it revealed in the story, Sarah is a poet, so I can understand that. So
yeah. So Sarah's a poet. That's something I didn't recognize. But so there's this is there's a lot of characters in this. Now the characters range from the girls at the school, the teachers, the servants around the school, or not necessarily the servants. They're paid. What would you call them? Like the coachmen and the
servants.
Servants, I get, yeah. So then the servants, and then also the police eventually. And so, but it focuses on, and also Appleyard, who is the head of the school. She owns, she basically founded the school, and she's the head.
She runs it and all that.
Runs it. But so the girls, the three main girls to begin with, the Miranda is really the one it focuses on first, and she's kind of the popular one. And Sarah is like kind of she's kind of latched on to Miranda, and she's kind of dependent on her for her psychological well-being, or the opposite of that.
well, Sarah is also the one who is not well off in terms of money. She's the orphan. So her guardian is who's responsible for paying her and paying for the tuition and stuff to the school. And a lot of the students, she's like the class pariah, where they all look down on her because she is the outcast. So yeah, she has latched onto Miranda, which is, I guess, the most popular girl at the school. So because they're roommates, so that's the whole reason why she is latched on.
Now, Miranda's presented in an interesting way. It kind of sets up a little bit of a mean girls thing with her and her two other friends, but she isn't that way.
Mm-mm.
Her other friends are maybe leaning that way, but for the most part, there's some kind of a benevolence about Miranda, that she is popular, but there's some kind of natural leadership quality to her.
Mm-hmm.
But she also seems to be tuned in to the possibility of what's about to happen before it happens.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. When I rewatched it, I was like, there is something about her that puts her off from all the other characters, especially she's from the very beginning. One of the first things she does is she's trying to warn Sarah to not latch onto her as much because she won't be there for much longer. And of course, it's kind of a little foreshadowing the fact that she won't, because she's one of the girls that disappears. But
right, and it's a very odd thing to say. There's a lot of very odd things that are said in this that I find very fascinating. But especially from that, Miranda says that specifically what you just said, that was like, she, like, why would she think it's almost like she saw like a glimpse of something in the future.
Yeah, because there's no mention of her or any of them like graduating. So you don't get that sense that she's leaving because she's graduating and because she's at the top of the social ladder. You don't think that she'll just leave for no apparent reason. So, and I don't think I recognized that the first time I saw the movie. I think it's only because I've seen the television show that I can go back and look at it now and see some of these subtle things that are in the film.
Right.
So, and then of course after that, the thing is that all the girls, because it's Valentine's Day, they're supposed to go on a trip to Hanging Rock, which is a famous landmark in their little town. But Sarah is the one who is forced to stay behind by the Appleyard mistress.
Right, and she seems like she's and the reason for that seems to be that she's in trouble. It doesn't ever show her doing anything to get in trouble. Not in the movie. It does in the show, but in the movie you never see her doing anything. So it seems like they're almost picking on her in a
Mm-hmm.
way. And then later on, it turns out, I mean, it would have been a better explanation, like that her tuition hasn't been paid, and then, so they're like, oh, she's not allowed to go on the trip because that costs extra money or whatever. But it almost seems like they are picking on her for some reason. I think Sarah may be autistic in a way. She almost seems like she might be autistic, and what she does, they don't understand that as autism, and they're punishing her for it. You
Well,
know?
yeah, that you know, no, I think you're right about that because the scene right after that with Sarah and the her teacher, she's the teacher's trying to get her to recite the poem that she's supposed to have done for homework, and instead she wants to recite the poem she wrote.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. It
uh,
does have that scene in there. That yeah. And then the teacher's like, "Nope, we don't want to hear
yeah,
it."
and she's very Sarah's defiant, saying,
Yeah.
"I don't know the poem. I can't recite it. I don't know it."
Yeah, that's actually that's Mrs. Appleyard who
Was it
was
Mrs.
in that
Appleyard?
scene. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It wasn't a teacher. It was Mrs. Appleyard herself. Because like for the most part, most of the teachers go on the picnic. Yeah, so,
I wasn't when I was watching it. I didn't take note of who it was. I
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
know what
yeah. I
happened.
wouldn't. Yeah, I didn't take a note of that scene, but now that you mention it, I do remember it. And that's a pretty important scene relating to Sarah and Mrs. Appleyard, really.
Yeah, because they have this constant conflict throughout the entire film, and it stems from the fact that Mrs. Appleyard is someone who's really she knows the books. She's really needs to maintain the financing for her school, and this is a person who's there whose tuition hasn't been paid yet. The only way she can curb that tuition or that cost is by not letting her go on a field trip and making her stay behind and doing other stuff like that. It does seem like she's picking on her because of a class thing, not so much
Yeah.
as anything that she's actually done that's wrong.
She yeah, I think throughout the film, Mrs. Appleyard, who doesn't go on the picnic when they go,
Mm-hmm.
and she's kind of everything that happens. She's one of the characters that gets like the kind of the most heat, and she's the one who's her and Sarah, the two characters who are really devastated by the events that take place at Hanging Rock, and it really like it builds up until the end with those two characters, and those are the two that kind of get screwed over the most during the course of the film.
Yeah, yeah. But getting back to like for the people who have not watched the film, they're all at the whole class except for Sarah, pretty much is at Hanging Rock, enjoying the outdoors. They've been warned about poisonous and dangerous snakes and ants by everyone multiple times.
Which this is Australia, so this
Yeah,
you do not want to be messing around in Australia.
yeah,
It is filmed in Australia too, and it looks terrific,
it
like the
does.
scenery and stuff. Even the house that they're doing, like the Appleyard Manor or whatever that is that they're doing the school in, which looks like a Victorian style house. It's a very very cool looking location.
Amazing location. That's
Yeah.
what I said. I'm like Peter Weir. There are details in all of his films where you mentioned this film, and I mentioned like the kind of the opposite, Dead Poet Society, which is all a boys' school, and the
Right. Yeah.
details in that film are just as prevalent as they are in this film, and this is a much earlier film. So,
So
um,
so they get into the picnic, which they get there and they encounter all these things that they're not supposed to encounter. But it's just not. I mean, it doesn't look like an ideal place or humidity. It seems like being very hot and very humid in there. There's a lot of tall grass and stuff around there, and they even have like a Valentine's Day cake that they cut, and I don't see anybody eating any of it, but it looks like it'd be melting and ants all over it at some point. I guess they probably did eat it. It just doesn't show it because I think when you see the ants, they're actually eating part of the cake, when it's already been opened.
But Miranda is all the girls at the school are down in the lower end of the Hanging Rock. But Miranda, I think Irma, Marion, and Edith become this little clique that decide to explore the rock more. And this is what I really loved about the film, because Peter Weir and his cinematographer do some amazing work with the camera as these girls are walking throughout the crevices of the mountain, and it's like, wow, this is you're. I have to believe that they actually shot all of this on location somewhere because it's so damn real.
Yeah, they had. I'm sure they did. Yeah.
Because it's amazing.
So on the way there, we do meet some other characters. The male characters, the men. There's two young men, different style. One of them is English, and the other one's an Australian coachman. Like he's there with his the younger guy's there with his dad, I believe, and some other English people who are out having their picnic, and they brought a table and they're having their tea or whatever, But two different type of characters who are just kind of out. They're out there in the same place, and then they see the women, they encounter them briefly, and so they're kind of witnesses to what happens after that.
Mm-hmm. You remember their names? Because we don't remember the two men's names.
Yeah, Albert is the one who is coaching. I'm trying to find my notes on this. I had Michael's the other one, and so here's a bit of dialogue between them that I think really says what both characters are like. Now, Albert makes some kind of crude comment, and then Michael says, "I'd rather you not say crude things like that, Albert." And Albert responds with, "I say crude things, you just think them," which is true, So it kind of like it puts these two characters. One of them's a younger English guy who's from an English family who's kind of well bred, and he keeps his thoughts to himself when he wouldn't say something crude about the women like Albert does, but he does at the same time think it.
Okay. Yeah, because they both will play more predominantly in the aftermath of the disappearance than they do for the brief moment that we see them on the mountain when the girls first pass by them. So.
Yeah. He makes a bit of a connection, even though it's a brief connection with Miranda. Michael does, because later on, when he's looking for them, he's saying her name specifically, like something about the way she turns around and looks back. There's one other moment too. There's like this other teacher, like the French teacher, Mademoiselle, who is kind of the more popular teacher, but she's really in tune with her feelings, which in some instances she seems almost like she has like an infatuation with Miranda. So in the way that the actress plays it, especially in this film, she looks like when Miranda goes to leave the picnic before they go up there, she looks almost like very infatuated with her. Like it could even be like a queer moment, but I don't think it quite is, but maybe it is. But she says something very odd to the other teacher. Oh, geez, I can't find my, here it is. So anyway, what she says is she says to the other teacher, she's like, I got it now. I think Miranda is a Bonalucci angel, which is an angel of like an artist, Bonalucci. So it's kind of a really odd thing to say, and I'm not exactly sure what it means, but she's looking at a book with the angels in it, and it's just like for some reason she thinks that Miranda is one of those angels from the book. And what's interesting about that in the novel, in the book version of Picnic at Hanging Rock, she doesn't say it out loud. She thinks it, and she starts to say something, and the other teacher kind of questions what she's about to say, but then she doesn't say it. So she holds it to herself. But she says it out loud in the movie and in the series. And the other teacher gives her like a weird look, like, what are you talking about? But the other teacher is the more is the older, more strict teacher, and she's the
Yeah.
one that ends up disappearing, and not the French teacher.
Hmm.
Anyway, so they're going. You could talk about the rock part after that. Yeah.
Well, obviously, something is drawing Miranda up the hanging rock further and further. And Edith is the only one, and Edith is the bigger girl who is not as
When Michael's
agile.
given the witness statement about
Yeah,
describing the girls, here's how he describes her. He's like, there was the little dumpy one.
dumpy,
That's how,
dumpy.
that's how he describes her. She's described differently in the book, but quite. She's described like fairly graphically, like overweight or whatever in the book. I can't remember the terms that she uses, but she is. She's not like the other girls who are very attractive and young looking. She is, but at the same time, and she's also very annoying. On top of that, she's
Hmm.
complaining all the time. But Miranda doesn't really. She deals with it. The other two are kind of getting annoyed with her, but Miranda's okay with it. But at the same time, she's the one that almost has to go with them because the teacher kind of makes her go with them to kind of keep them in line, I think, because they know that they're not going to get in too much trouble with her there,
Yeah, yeah. But
or they assume anyway, I think.
yeah, but she's the one who kind of starts to, because she doesn't like hiking and she doesn't like being up there and she's always behind the other three. She's the one that stops and wants to
Yeah.
go back, whereas the other three continue walking forward. Now, at this,
Here,
go
I
ahead.
actually say I gotta point this throw this out. Here's a line she says, um, a little bit before that, and this is like when you see, but right before you see the ants eating the cake, and she says something like, she says, "Except for the people down there." She looks down at the people. She's like, "We might be the only living creatures in the whole world," and it's like just says something dumb like that, because it's like, what do you mean? We might be the only living creature. What about? And then right after that, it cuts to a shot of ants. So it's like, and the ants and the snakes. But that's Edith saying something just like thinks she's like freaking brilliant. Now, one thing about all these characters is they are students and they're looking at like literature, like the French teacher's looking at the book about the angels, the Bonalici angels. So they're all very educated. So their thoughts are kind of piggybacking off of what they've been learning about in their studies. So you could tell from some of that. So they even Edith, she's trying to be deep with her thought, but unlike what some of the other people say, that is like doesn't work. We may be the only people, the only living creatures in the whole world, and it's like I don't know. But anyway, I should want to point that out. It's something I wrote down
So it's a
in
good point to
comparison
point out
to yeah,
because
yeah.
she's the one who runs away before going all the way up the rock. The other three go up the rock, and Edith can't seem to get their attention, which scares her. Among other things, she's already on the edge by that point in the film. And instead of going up and falling even further up the rock, she heads down the rock in a state of panic and frantic. So much so that she becomes catatonic when she finally gets down to the bottom, and she's injured
So
herself by running through the brambles, as they like to say, and everything else. Um,
leading up to this, there's some indications of some possible supernatural type of stuff going on. The
mhm.
first thing that happens are the watches all stop at noon, um, which indicates a magnetic force. Like a magnetic force can cause a pocket watch or a wrist watch to stop. Which those types of forces are sometimes connected, especially back then, in with possible supernatural forces or maybe parallel worlds opening or time rifts or something of that nature. But something seems to be drawing the women up the cliff, and it shows like a rock, which the hanging rock, I guess. But there's a lot of rocks, but it shows a specific one several times.
Mhm.
Um, and in the book, it's described as a monolith.
That's how it looks in the movie too, like a monolith.
Yeah,
That's what I thought.
monolith. And so, monolith, like it's a natural monolith, but at the same time, it could be disguised as something else. When you think about like the monolith in the 2001: A Space Odyssey, like the black boxes that show up, and it could be something to that nature that's hidden in plain sight, but it's at the top of the mountain. So that's a possibility, and especially because they keep calling it a monolith, and came out after the Space Odyssey
Mm.
film.
And it also, I mean, and the girls aren't the only one affected. What was his name? Albert. The
Yeah,
English guy gets
yeah.
affected when he goes too high up there. His
But
friend.
it has to be at a certain time, though. Apparently, you can't. It's not all the time. It's certain circumstances seem to cause it to happen,
Mm,
which I'm not exactly sure what those are. But they basically when when the cops are like looking, they don't see anything. They clearly go up there by it. That monolith is chilling out. It's being very quiet then. So if that's
yeah.
it, that's just if that's what it is. But
Well, yeah. They also don't find Irma when they go up there. Irma's found days later by Albert's. Well, I guess
yeah,
Albert finds her.
Michael.
Well, Albert, I guess, finds her dress, and then when he gets down the mountain, he gives Michael that dress piece that he was holding on to, and then Michael runs back up and discovers her.
Right. Well, I guess before we get into that too deep, I was going to point out a couple other things about that happens. So when they get to the top, the women go to sleep on the ground, and then everybody else in the picnic area also falls asleep,
Mm-hmm.
except for Mrs. Crawley, the teacher who ends up disappearing too. But they all fall asleep, and then I think she may actually fall asleep too. Mrs. McCraw does, but then when she hears the screams of Edith, she goes searching for her. A lot of this is not seen. A lot of this is said in dialogue in the film.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that this presence or whatever this is on this hanging rock, it causes everybody to go to sleep so it can lure the women. I'm assuming it's my assumption is it's not a good thing. When I say the word lure, my assumption is it is not for the good, but it could be though. I mean, it's not said. I mean, maybe they're wherever they go is good, but it's never said. But it seems very foreboding what's happening in the film.
Well, I think I agree. I think it's luring them, and I think that it's not a good thing because Irma is found, whereas the other three are never found.
Right, right, and
Oh well,
so
the other
yeah,
two because the teacher's body is found. That's right.
the teacher's body not in the film. I don't think.
Yeah, yeah. They find the teacher, but not they say she fell off the cliff.
No, but that's actually referring to Mrs. Appleyard
No,
at the end of the film.
no, it's not the end. This isn't at the end of the film. They were, yeah. Well, maybe. Shit.
I'm pretty sure they don't find the teacher, but I could be mistaken.
Mm.
I have seen it. I have like I see this in different. I've seen it in the film and I've seen the series in the book, but I think if you look at the narration from the end of it, I think it says that she wasn't found, and
You
I
could be
think they
right.
found some. I think they found a piece of her clothing, but not the teacher herself. Now, that's another thing weird happens too when they're up at the top of the cliff. All the three women who disappear, they take off their shoes
Mm-hmm.
and eventually their corsets, which it doesn't show in the film, but they remove those items of clothing for some reason.
Yeah.
So anyway, basically the two young men, which are a little you're kind of suspecting them for a little bit, like maybe they hurt the women or did something because they're really the only suspects, but they actually go back like you're saying, and then they save Irma and they bring her back, and then she doesn't remember anything, which is inconvenient, I guess. So
I don't know if that's how it is in the book because I can't remember. I saw the series when it originally came out, so I don't remember all the details of the series. But yes, it does seem convenient that.
yeah.
But it also could be adding to the mystery and the mystique of the actual incident itself for the film version.
Right. I don't think that I mean, even in the series, the miniseries, she didn't remember. Now they have a very brief scene in the film where the young man goes and visits her, but he never has any dialogue with her in the film. But they actually have a pretty good bit of scenes between him and Irma later on, and they almost develop a relationship, but then she leaves.
Hmm.
In the miniseries, I'm not sure how that part goes in the book. I didn't read the whole book, but I was really like looking for certain things that I thought stood out. Here's a line that I thought was kind of interesting. When they're driving to the rock to begin with, is something Irma says. Uh, she says, she's like, it's been waiting 1,000,000 years just for us, and while they're riding to the rock. Now this is the Irma says this. She's not Miranda. She's the one that they ends up. Now that's interesting. The way Miranda's not the one that comes back. It's one of the other two
Uh-huh.
kind of sidekicks, say. But it's a weird thing for her to say again. These characters are probably studying philosophy of some sort, I
Hmm.
assume, from what they say a lot. Not all of this stuff is in the book that they say. I think Peter Weir, Peter Weir did, or not him, like whoever the writer was for the screenplay, um, added some of this poetic stuff in there. But what do you think about that line when she's waiting for 1,000,000? It looks like it's been waiting for 1,000,000 years just for us. One of the three women that disappears, and then she ends up being spit out by it.
Well, also keep in mind that in that same conversation, the one teacher and the driver thinks that the mountain's only been there for 10,000 years, and the teacher
Yeah,
needs
yeah,
to correct her that it's 1,000,000 years because it's been formed by a volcano. So
right. Yeah.
it's this mysterious thing, like a mysterious landmark that everyone is aware of, but nothing has ever really happened until now. And so this incident where these four people go missing is not only headlines, and this will play in bigger later in the film, but it's also one of the most terrifying things that anyone around there has ever experienced. It's nothing that has ever happened there before. It's probably been a very quiet town with people who know each other, and this is just. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think isn't there someone who at some point says it couldn't have been someone local? It had to be someone who wasn't local that may have abducted these kids.
Yeah, I think that may be said, but that seems like a reasonable thing to say. It does seem like how disappointing would that be if that was the explanation, like a character you didn't even know just randomly like kidnaps them. But I mean that's probably like a if you're going to take this out of any kind of science fiction or supernatural sort of stuff, then that would be the most likely explanation
mhm.
for where they go. Somebody kidnaps them and then returns Irma, but for whatever reason, but
But that's the
they
thing
she
that
her like hands are messed up. Like she's been clawing at something. Her feet are fine, and she hasn't been raped. They check her for that, and she hasn't been raped. And those are kind of
telltale signs of someone actually abducting her. So, but the thing is with this film and all the characters, and the second act of this film is a little odd because the first act you're really believing that there's this parallel story or development between what's happening with Miranda, what's happening with Sarah, but Sarah disappears for a huge chunk of the second act as you're following what happened to all these girls by the townspeople and everyone else. And
right.
Sarah really doesn't
Yeah.
have a journey at all. She's this secondary background character for most of the second act.
Who's Sarah? You mean?
Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah.
Because
Um.
go ahead.
Yeah. No. I mean, I think that's what's the thing about the film, and the thing that no one expects is you don't know what to expect exactly from this film because you have an exposition, a very like awesome part of the Hanging Rock where the women disappear, and then you have a investigation for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
but then after that, it starts following characters that you haven't really spent a lot of time with in different scenes. It's almost like different scenes of different characters just talking about what had happened and how it affected them, So it almost becomes like the second or really the third part of the film is an epilogue once it gets past most of the investigation, the kids, the two young, I don't know why I'm calling them kids, but they're young men. They go and they save Irma. After that, that's really like the climax of the film, and then how they're going to react to that. I think an interesting scene is when they bring her in to see all of the other girls for the first time, and she's leaving. She's like, you got 10 minutes with her, and she comes in dressed all in red.
All red. Yes, yeah. I noticed that too.
And then they all want to know what happened. They don't believe that she doesn't know, but they start acting like savages all of a sudden. Yeah. They just lose their composure, and it's just it's almost like, to me, that's the audience. Like, what happened to him? And it's like, tell us what happened.
It's a mob mentality. This person that they've all been with at that school suddenly can't remember what happened to her and her other friends on this rock. And of course, it's a closed community of girls, and of course, they're like wanting to know what happened because they're still missing their friends. But they literally attack her, Irma.
Yeah. It's very, very animalistic almost, and one of the teachers in there, that this is the teacher you don't see that much until the second half, and she's like the more of a, she's kind of like the teacher that's kind of got the other ones, like Appleyard's, like back more, and she's more strict. And she's actually, during that scene, she's got Sarah like tied up against the wall because she's punishing her for something autistic that she did probably, but she's like freaks out, gets under the table and hides during that whole thing. And she's like, she has no control. She lost complete control of the class. The French teacher's in there, but she deals with it fine. She's like, okay, they're losing their minds. This is a natural thing for these people to be expressing themselves in an animalistic type of way. But at the same time, it's not, for this other teacher, she thinks these women should always be proper and handle the situation differently. But the French teacher from a different culture is more accepting of this type of behavior, and it doesn't seem, she's phased by it a little bit, but she's not so phased that she's hiding under the table. And then she actually quits after that, the one that's hiding under the table. Like in the next scene, she's like, I'm out. That's it.
The stress was too much for her.
Yeah.
But you bring up an interesting fallout between all this with Mrs. Appleyard is that, after Irma is found, the one teacher is saying, this is great news. And the first thing you hear out of Appleyard's mouth is that this is not good news.
Yeah.
If they had found 3 out of 4, it would have been good news. But they lost some tuition from 3 students who were pulled by their parents because of the incident. And then, of course, the other 3 students who were missing, who obviously aren't going to be paying tuition. And then, of course, all the bad publicity. So she's someone just worried about keeping her doors open. And from that point on, it's kind of like, what can we do to minimize the fallout? Oh, we need to get Sarah out of here because her parents aren't paying anything anyways. We got to find ways to get her to minimize the fallout of this, but she can't. She can't.
Yeah. I think she's in a really bad state, and she handles it very bad. There's a scene near the end. It's one of the last scenes.
I'm thinking of the one I'm thinking of too, but you go ahead.
Well, actually, no, I'm kind of like, I guess I should talk about something, what the lead up to that and what happens with Sarah, but I don't know if it's too early to talk about that yet. What basically the ultimate fate of Sarah and what happens to her, and basically the tragedy in 2 different ways of what happens to her, and then Applegate losing it at the end, but yeah, I guess let's just go ahead and talk about it. We can go back to this other stuff later, but so Sarah, there's some really odd scenes near the end. So Applegate like progressively gets more, and then she has to tell Sarah that she has to leave because she's not paying her tuition. They can't get in touch with her, so she has to be sent back to the orphanage. So she goes to her, and there's actually a scene with Applegate practicing this speech before she goes in there to say it. So she's a very, very like mysterious character, but at the same time, it's like she doesn't want like, I don't know exactly what she wants from Sarah. She seems to not like her, and she seems to be taking out a lot of aggression on her. But At the same time, she doesn't want to go in there and tell her, or she has to practice it before she goes in and tells her that she has to go back to the orphanage. And so something mysteriously happens. Sarah's found dead in the greenhouse the next day, by the greenhouse guy. Um, and then he looks up and looks at the window, assumes that she jumped out of it, which is probably what happened. But then Appleyard tells the French teacher, Mademoiselle, that Sarah's
Guardian.
guardian had already came and picked her up. Which why does she say that when she's dead? You know. But before Sarah's found, there's a scene when she's sitting at this table drinking, and she's getting drunk. She's with Mademoiselle, and she says, she starts talking about Greta McCall, like the teacher that disappeared, and she starts talking about how she had a masculine intellect, and she can't believe that she allowed herself to be spirited away, and lost and raped, murdered in cold blood like a silly schoolgirl on that wretched hanging rock. But she kind of loses it for a second. She says that, but then she snaps back into reality and acts like she didn't say it. But she just like goes completely tells what her real feelings are.
Mm-hmm.
She was really dependent on this other teacher who disappeared. She was kind of, I guess, like the teacher, that the glue that was holding things together for her.
I can see that.
Mademoiselle's clearly the best teacher, but this other teacher was the one kind of keeping everybody in line, as far as, especially with the Applegate character, who doesn't like dealing with the students.
Yeah.
Because when she does deal with them, she's very mean, like when she's dealing with Sarah. And I guess that's maybe why she's doing the practicing before she goes in there, because she doesn't like dealing with it, you know?
That's a good point. I didn't think about that. Yeah, you're right. I did not even think about that.
Yeah, then maybe it's there's some people, especially people who are in charge like that, they're better as administrators, but not as they don't like the students, but they may be good as an administrator. And she maybe, in a way, wants to let them use her house, and she wants to be in charge of the house, but deep down, it's like not really her personality, or something that's kind of goes against what she is, in a way. But
there's a lot of interesting ideals in the film in regards to this character, Appleyard, in which you don't always understand her motivations or why she does certain things. But I think that makes her character much more interesting, because you don't see as much from some of the other teachers, and you most certainly don't see it in most of the students.
Right, and this it actually is. I mean, the characters in this are very well drawn. All of them, really. For even the ones that don't have that much screen time, have very interesting moments. But something really, I guess, is the biggest rub with Sarah. And well, so the question is, what happened to her? Did she commit suicide? Did Applegate kill her? Did Applegate know she was dead and just pretend like she wasn't dead for a day? But Albert, the coachman, he finds out. He doesn't even find out in the film, but the audience finds out that Sarah is his sister, right? So there's a moment where, as the audience is watching it, like, Sarah could be saved. She doesn't have to go back to the orphanage. Her brother's there. She could be with her brother. But that's the biggest tragedy of the whole thing.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah.
Among other tragedies.
Yeah, other than her getting killed. But it's like, he finds, I think he even finds out about it, like, that she's a girl, a student at school, and he has a dream. He's talking to Michael, the last scene with him and Michael, and it's a really cool scene. But he's talking to Michael, says he had a dream, but then Albert's like, I had a dream and I saw my sister. Her name's Sarah, and he talks about her, almost like he saw her. But it was so, that's the thing. It was so close to reuniting with his sister, but then it doesn't happen.
Do you think it would have been better if they had been reunited, or you think ending the film the way it went in line with the rest of the film?
Well, I think it's like, I mean, as a human being, I would have preferred that he reunited with his sister. But as far as, like, the story and the tragedy of it. I
Yes.
think it leaves a very tragic, deep moment for those characters who could have had something, and they were so close, but then they were in the same, probably a couple miles away from each other this whole time, and it's like, and it's just that it's just very it's very messed up, really, you know.
Well, I think Sarah's whole life, as depicted in the film, is tragic. Even from the very first moment, she's in the scene with Miranda, and Miranda knows that Sarah has feelings for her. They don't come out and just say it, but Miranda already says it's kind of unhealthy. And you get the sense that, especially when Sarah's the only person who realizes that Miranda and the other girls did not return back when the coach returns at night with all the other students.
Right.
The first day.
She's the only one that notices.
She's the only one
right
that
away.
notices.
She just walks out there in a daze, like she knows. There's a scene. There's a scene with that the Mademoiselle character, the French teacher, is very in tune to Sarah and her feelings, and she tries to help her. It isn't enough, but she tries. There's a scene where she's talking to Sarah, and she tells Sarah, this has been a while, like after they've disappeared for a few days. She's like, Miranda might not come back, and Sarah says, Miranda knows lots of things that other people don't, secrets, and she knew she wouldn't come back because of the conversation she had earlier. That reminds me a lot of Twin Peaks, like Laura Palmer's Secrets. And Twin Peaks was clearly later, but just that's another kind of Miranda and Laura Palmer kind of connection. But the fact that Sarah, though, like she relates this, like Sarah knows she's not coming back because of what Miranda said earlier in the film, and she says Miranda knows lots of things.
Yeah, well, it leads to a lot of different interpretations on certain things. I really, when I rewatched the film, I liked the Sarah character. And like I said, I saw this several years back, so I wasn't paying nearly as much attention to it as I did when the miniseries came out, the remake came out. So it was good to revisit the film for the podcast. And I actually ended up liking Sarah's character a lot more than I thought I would, because of the ambiguity of the character and the fact that she is, I don't like to say shit on by Mrs. Appleyard, but pretty much like that. She's like picked on. And so she makes for a very strong character, except for that last scene where she seemingly commits suicide, which seemed for me to be out of place.
Well, I think in the film, though, it's not like to me, it does seem like she's devastated by what happened to Miranda, for one thing. I don't know her going back to the orphanage. I guess she doesn't. I mean, if she committed suicide and Appleyard didn't kill her, which is very suspicious. But I mean, I think that I don't know which one it is, but I think she probably did commit suicide. But she does seem to be devastated, and that's the last straw of it, going back to the orphanage. Here's a quote that Irma says about Sarah, and this is actually in the book too, because I was looking for it in the book. She says there's a foreshadowing about it while they're up on the rock before they disappear. Irma says she reminds me of a little deer Papa brought home once. I looked after it, but it died. Mama always said it was doomed to die. And so that's the foreshadowing bit of information about Sarah that's in there. That I guess if you don't know Sarah's end already, because you don't, I think as an audience member, like you don't want Sarah to die because you like her, and you feel sorry for her, and it's bad that the character has to go through so much just to meet an ending, unhappy ending.
Interesting. I didn't pick up on that one. That's something I'll definitely pick up on a second viewing, or third viewing of the film.
Right, and that was like one of the lines too. Like some of these lines that are great in the movie are not in the book, but that's one that was almost lifted directly from the book. There's a little bit more conversation in the book than what's in the movie during that part, but that it's an interesting bit of foreshadowing about Sarah that comes to pass. that on like saying on first viewing, you may not accept that as the ending until it happens.
Mm. So, what did you think about and this is, I don't know the time period, but this is weeks after the actual incident happens, and the investigation is close to being done, if not already done. Because the very first thing we see is the presumed dead poster of the three missing people, and then you see at the base of the hanging rock the police and the people who are searching for the girls are all taking a picture. You see normal people having picnics.
Yeah. Right.
It's a very odd sequence.
Yeah.
But it's this thing as though you're all the media, the media are there taking pictures and everything like that, and you see how this incident has made them national news and probably helped tourism. I hate to say that, but helped tourism. So it's an odd scene for me. But it's also the last scene in which we see the cops, I believe, because their investigation's over, and then we move back to the regular characters again.
Right, and that's So that reminds me of something we hadn't even talked about, but
cops.
So, well, not the cops. I think we hadn't talked about the cops that much, but just the story itself. It's kind of like the Blair Witch. Like people didn't know whether this was a true based on a true event or not, and it could be. But it's a matter of fact, like the director Peter Weir, he went to talk to the author, which I'd like to talk more about the author in a minute. But he went and asked her some questions about it. He was told specifically not to ask her if it was a true story or not, but he asked her anyway, and she said, "Hey, I really wish you hadn't asked me that. Don't ask me that again." And then after that, he's like, he asked her some other questions about the ending being open ended. He was a little worried about it. He said, could they have fallen down a hole or been abducted by aliens? And then she answered that with like, it could be any of those, but she didn't answer anything specific,
Oh,
but
really?
that was, but the thing is, a lot of people thought this might have been real, just like the Blair Witch Project. As far as like a celebrity encounter, so this book was made like in the late '60s. The movie's 1975. It takes place in 1900. So this is kind of an equivalent. Now, 75 or 60, late 60s. I don't know where we would be with what would be the thing then. Probably newspapers, maybe TV for getting celebrities. But yeah, it would be the like if something happened, like the Blair Witch happened in real life, or like the way some people were obsessed with like where murders happen, or they go to places that might be haunted to stay there. But yeah, there is that's an interesting scene though when people were enjoying themselves at the Hanging Rock without knowing the possible danger that they could be in.
Well, think of it this way: all the other scenes of Hanging Rock have had very few people there, except for when the whole class of girls are right there. But that scene there, you see lots of people there, and you don't get the sense that they're all associated with the police and the media.
Right, yeah,
like
yeah. It is. They're all they're like taking pictures and all that. Yeah, it's great. It's a great scene though. I mean, it's like that might. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was great though, but it's just funny the way, and that's kind of a human nature bit of thing that you see there. That especially when you see the mob mentality in the other, and then you see that it's kind of a nasty piece of human nature that does tend to happen.
Mhm.
People becoming they forget about the humanity part of it all, I guess.
Well, no, I agree with you. That's the reason why I wanted to bring it up, because you see that scene, and then the next thing you see is Apple Yard School going in complete decline. And then the last major scene you see at the Apple Yard is all these girls packed up in the carriage leaving.
Right.
And you see the French teacher walking back up these empty steps. There's no one running down the steps. Some of the servants have walked into the building, and she's walking up these empty steps. And you know that this school is not going to survive after this incident. It's going to slowly decline until they have nobody left.
Yeah, it's
It's
Then it's weird that the incident would make the Hanging Rock more popular, but then the school would be like, I mean, they got a liability issue on their hands to begin with letting the girls go to the Hanging Rock to begin with, and um,
that's a
you
good
know,
question right there because I always, until I rewatched it, I kept thinking that this was like a yearly thing that they did for Valentine's Day, but it doesn't come off that way when I rewatched it. When they're explaining everything in the car on the way there, and no one goes up the mountain, they all stay at the bottom of the mountain except for these four girls. You gotta get an idea that maybe this is the first time they've ever gone to the Rock.
I think that it's not really explicit in the film. I have seen other writings about Miranda coming up with the idea, and then everyone else kind of like slowly introducing it as a field trip sort of thing. One of the girls, the other girl who you see less than the other than Irma and Miranda. I don't know,
Marion?
Marion. She's the one that says that she wants to take some measurements at the bottom of the Hanging Rock. So that's the reason why they go off. That's what they say that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's Marion saying that she wants to do that. Uh, but as far as yeah, I mean, I think it's probably pushed by Miranda, but it's not said, specifically. There's a lot of exposition and characters to be introduced at the beginning for that to really have worked, I think.
Interesting. It's kind of
Um,
like the reason why I think the second act goes, you have the investigation and you spend more time with locals as well. It's a very odd structure. It almost seems like a Twin Peaks where you have multiple different storylines going on.
yeah, yeah, and it's like I guess it's like if it may be a little disappointing to watch for some people. I think with just the tonal shift in a way, and it starts like because people are wanting the mystery, wanting to know more about the mystery, and they want the mystery to be solved. And here you are focusing on like say the maid and her boyfriend,
Yeah.
and and then he goes and talks to the gardener, which is a very interesting conversation. And I'm trying to I can't find the dialogue from it, but he's talking to the gardener, and the gardener says something about yeah, here it is. He says he's talking to him about the whole thing and their feelings on it, and then Mr. Whitehead, the gardener, says some questions got answers, some don't, which I think is a pretty deep thing the very wise gardener, and that's kind of what he's saying about the movie too. Like you're not going to get an answer to this, but then he does mention some plants move, and he
Yeah.
shows Tom the plant move. And so he's saying there's some things don't have answers and some do, and like a plant moving, maybe it has something to do with a plant that moves. It could be like the ruins or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
Um,
when I rewatched it, I was like, oh yeah, I guess there was a scene like this in there, and I was like, oh, but what does
yeah,
it do? There's a lot of possibilities.
but yeah, a scene with the gardener and Tom too. It helps establish the location where Sarah dies. So it kind of serves two purposes. It really serves three purposes. It serves you're seeing more people's reaction to what's going on. You
Mhm.
have that's like really what they're trying to say about the film. Some questions got answers, some don't. And then you establish the garden house where Sarah falls through the window and dies there.
Yeah,
Um, Here's another note I had on the same page here that when they're doing that one scene you're talking about when they're back in front of the Hanging Rock and they're all taking pictures. They also have these tables set up and they're like drinking tea. The cops are almost like coffee and the Twin Peaks reminds me because they're always drinking coffee. They actually have a scene similar to that where they're out in the woods and then they bring coffee to them, and
yep.
donuts.
Well,
But it's
you have
kind of
that one volunteer with her hands filled with glass or cups. I'm assuming of coffee, bringing or tea, bringing them back and forth to the people who are out there. I noticed all that too. I was like,
yeah, it's fun because it's like you got to think about equivalent of today. Like now it would be like maybe some people bringing some cokes or beer or something out there, but or for the cops it is coffee, but but yeah, they're bringing like the hot tea out, like that. That would be like equivalent to that sort of thing, you know.
Mhm.
Um, so here's another thing that Miranda says when they're up on the hanging rock before they disappear. This is like I think the quote that is even on like a lot of the posters and stuff for the film. But she says everything begins and ends exactly at the right time and place. So I don't. What do you make of that quote?
I think I wrote that exact same quote down as myself.
Yeah, yeah.
I
But
think
that's
everything
that.
begins and ends at the right time and the right place. I wrote the exact same.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it sticks out. I mean, that's like Miranda. Like the other girls are saying stuff. Miranda's not saying necessarily that much, but then she says that.
And it sticks out.
Uh, yeah. Uh,
I think she knows when her time is, and when and it's one of those things where she knows where her time is, and she's not afraid of when it comes. Whatever is drawing these girls up to the top of Hanging Rock, they're not afraid of it. The only time or mention that we get of something that might terrify the three girls, I don't include Edith because Edith is afraid the entire time she's walking, is Irma,
yeah.
who is the one they find. And then, of course, she's catatonic and can't remember what happened anyways. But the other ones may have just been satisfied with what was going to happen to them. Now, I don't know if this is aliens or plants that come alive like in the ruins or what, or something more supernatural, because, of course, the music to the film adds to that supernatural element. It seems out of place, but it seems perfect for the movie.
They call that some kind of pipes.
Some type of flute. I can't remember. It has a name.
Flute pipes or something.
That music is like pitch perfect for this film, and to set the mood and tone. Like, they're not scared, these three girls, when they go up. And
it seems kind of folk like folk music a little bit.
But they take off their shoes.
Here it is. Pan pipes. That's what they're called. Yeah. It's Romanian folk music.
Well, then it probably could be some type of supernatural element in Romanian folk music.
Yeah, it's like apparently done by his name's Georgi Zanfir, I think is how you pronounce it. But sorry, go ahead. So they take off their shoes and they're comfortable up there.
Yeah, and so I don't think it's something that audiences should be terrified of. This isn't like the ruins. This is something that they're almost like they're ascending, and no one ever finds their body. So they go up and never come down.
Right. And I think that's the question that I was asking earlier, it does seem like it's sinister, but maybe it's not. Maybe they are ascending to a better plane than what they're on. But and maybe Irma was rejected by it.
Rejected. I like that. She was rejected, and of course, unfortunately for us, we have to watch Sarah commit suicide because she's stuck.
Right.
I mean, and like I said, it's her entire life in this movie. I didn't realize till I rewatched it. It's so fucking tragic. It's like,
she's
what more can happen to this girl?
Luckily, like you said, Sarah isn't really the focus of the second half. No. You see her intermittently, but the problem with Sarah is it just keeps getting worse, and you can't just keep showing it getting worse because you want like something good to happen to her, and you can't. I think it's better that it doesn't necessarily keep showing. It does show her a pretty good bit, but not like doesn't focus on her. I mean, it does show like a scene, like say the cop actually comes into the room with the French teacher, and they're addressing Sarah for some reason. Like the French teacher probably brought him in there so she could hear it, and then the cop says, one more go with the bloodhounds, and then they go out there with the dogs and don't find anything. But
yeah, well, you think that for the first act, you think that Sarah might be a main character, but the shift in focus during the second act makes her just become like a background character, so that like you said, her entire story is tragic, and there's no sign of any type of light at the end of the tunnel for her.
Right. and as a writer, a director, and you know her story. I mean, so what do you do? You know what I'm saying? It's like, yeah. I mean, plus they have to focus on a few other things because they have to show Michael's story and also
Hmm.
Mrs. Applegate's story, and the French teacher trying to keep everything together the best she can, but it's not going to happen. But she stays positive and
Yeah.
tries to transition everybody from where they're at to the next thing they're going to be doing.
Yeah. Well, that's where the miniseries is excels at is you get enough time with all the characters. So it's one of those things. I mean, for a film from 1975, I think it still holds up pretty damn well. Uh,
I think the film has a timeless quality to it. It helps that it takes place in a different era.
mhm.
It takes place in the 1900s, at the turn of the century. So to that extent, it has a timeless quality to it because it doesn't look like it. I mean, it could have been made today. The film would look a little different. It would look more digital today because it's shot on film, but it would. I think it could be made today, and if you take something that took place that long ago, and it would still have the same type of quality. Um, it's a little bit about the author herself. Her name was Joan Lindsay. She was born in 1896, so she was alive in 1900 when the story takes place, but very young. She's like 4 years old, I guess, you know. But she was kind of familiar with that time period a little bit from her childhood. She wrote the novel in 1967, so she's pretty old already when she wrote it. She wrote a few other novels before this one. Um, she was, but not like nothing too that was really translated like this one did. After this, she had some issues with her health, and her husband had some issues, so that she never really wrote. I think she wrote another like a kid's book after this, but nothing really quite like this. She died in 1984, and then the last part of this was released in 1987 after she was already dead. Which this film was made in 75 when she was still alive. So like when the director was able to question her about it, but she still wasn't giving up what she thought the ending was. She didn't want him to know. But I feel like from her the ending what that was released, I feel like he kind of like set it up for what the end because he kept the important parts in there for what the ending is. And what's really interesting about her is she said she had the idea of the novel based on a dream that she had, and she had a dream that it was centered on a summer picnic at a place called Hanging Rock, just like what happened. And then she woke up and she couldn't get it out of her head, and she had a and the maid her housekeeper would was telling the story about it how she would sit there at night and just write it and just, and she said that she had most of the story in a dream, most of what was written there. But she said she felt almost like she was possessed writing the story itself, like maybe something like almost like something might have been controlling her to write it.
Huh. Okay.
That's yeah. But it's yeah, I mean that's kind of an interesting I've kind of like not necessarily possessed, but oh that might be a little stronger word. I kind of felt that sometimes when I've been writing things. I just felt like something that I had in my head, and it was almost like I had to get it out. I had to write it
Oh yeah.
like that, and it's just like a and that's it's a pretty cool thing to happen, but it is very consuming when it does happen. And I could see her sitting there with all these papers on the floor, writing out these characters and the situations throughout, and trying to connect it all. Um, so that's now there's a picture of there's like a painting in her husband's office. He worked at a museum, and there's a William Ford's 1875 painting at the Hanging Rock. So it's like the Hanging Rock with a bunch of people kind of having a party or a picnic in front of it.
Huh.
And that's an actual painting. You can see that was in 1875 before this story even takes place. Um,
Interesting.
so this
We don't always get
so
tidbits about the actual authors of some of these movies that we talk about. So it's good to have some of that here.
right, and yeah, and I almost didn't look into it for some reason, but now the more I started thinking about it, it was like the novel itself is like one of Australia's I guess one of their best known novels, and it was kind of especially for a long time, and so that I started thinking, okay, so it's based on this novel, and the novel is also included in the Criterion set, so that's why I read some of it. But yeah, I was like, this came Peter Weir put his own touch on it in a way. I think he did a very fantastic job of translating this novel into, to the screen, and just looking at like especially the lines that he added really complement what's in the novel. And some of the lines he actually took directly from the novel, but some of them they complement what was already there.
Okay.
And I guess like here's something that someone was talking about the author after her death, and then they remarked about the subtle supernatural elements in there, and they said that she was interested in spiritualism, uh, and longed for some spiritual dimension in her life, and she didn't feel safe bringing that out in front of her husband at the time because of that. At the time, I guess times it was a little different, more proper with what they were doing and things of that nature. But she seemed to be very fascinated with those type of ideas, and it is there in the story, but it's very subtly in there, and it's not like an explanation for it. But
Hmm.
so it's like spiritualism is it's a metaphysical belief, and metaphysical is the philosophy which deals with such as being, knowing, substance, cause, identity, time, and space. Well, time and space really stick out in that for what happens in the film.
Yeah, it does.
So it's they deal with time. You see clocks a lot, and the clocks stop when they disappear. Well, they stop working
Stop
at noon.
working.
They disappear probably around 2, but it's kind of like leads into it. I
Yeah,
think
because
once the clocks, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was about to say once the clock stops, even
Yeah,
even editing wise, you don't get a sense of time that often
yeah,
because of the way it's edited and one scene segues to the next scene, but you know days have gone by, time, weeks have gone by. Time has gone by, but you don't get a sense of it anymore after that. I think that was purposely done. I think there's a couple times only where a character says it was a week since the incident happened and so on and so forth. But you kind of lose track of how much, like the time when they're all picnicking and taking pictures at the bottom of Hanging Rock, you have no idea how long it's been since the original incident, and this is
yeah.
supposed to be the end. Like the time kind
Right.
of flows. It's
Yeah.
very odd. I picked that up as I was watching. I was like, it's very odd. But yeah, I can see that.
But the time too, also with the watches stop, that's when they're drawn to the top of the rock because the watch it was after that. That's when it starts to. There's some rumbling sounds that are happening that I assume are really happening and not part of the soundtrack, but it's kind of a call to bring them up there.
Yeah.
Um, you ready to talk about what the the ending is really in the other novel? I mean
The what? Oh, you mean the what the ending that's in the novel? Yes. If you want to
with
go into that, tell me, please.
yeah. So I don't have it in front of me, but I can kind of tell you what it is. And this is like I say, I don't necessarily think you need this, and I think that everything is there for this. But it's actually I think the mystery is cool that not knowing it, but I think like thinking that this might be it. So what they say happened is I mean, and it is also vague as well, but there and it's part of what I'm saying is probably my feeling of some of the blanks, but they go up to the top of the rock and they go through like a some kind of a rift or portal in the rock. Um, the three women and the teacher eventually, and while they're in there, a rock falls in front of Irma, and she gets like away from the other ones. Like they end up on the other side of it, but she's trapped on the inside of it. That's why her hands are clawed up and not her feet. She tried to claw into the rock to get back to them, but then she has to return. So it doesn't tell you where they went, but it does tell you that there was a time rip or some kind of portal or something that was there, kind of like I was saying with the monolith of the rock, kind of
Huh.
like a. But that's kind of what that's what the final the secret of Hanging Rock. they released that after her death, and they said that she wrote it. Well, she's not allowed to verify that, but if you think about it, there's evidence of all that in there, and Peter Weir used all of the things that all the things that he used were there for that ending to make sense.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Except for then, I try to figure out what happened. How you'd have to think about how long it took the teacher to make her way up there and disappear with them, if she disappeared with them, versus Irma, who you say is forced to come back down.
Right. Yeah, I didn't actually read the whole thing. But I hadn't.
That's a weird.
But
yeah, if it was just the three girls who disappeared and not the teacher too, I would say, wow, that's a cool.
The teacher too was found without. I guess she was missing part of her garments. Like she was seen without her skirt on or something, walking up there, and she was drawn to it. I guess that character was drawn into it. The teacher's very, very puzzling part of it for sure.
Well, anything else you want to say about Picnic?
I guess one last thing we hadn't talked about was Applegate, Mrs. Applegate's final moments. Yeah, Appleyard. I was saying Applegate, but yeah, Apple. Is it called Appleyard? But yeah, Appleyard. When they come back in and they find Sarah's dead, and they come back in to talk to her about it, she's all dressed in black like a widow, and she has even a widow veil hanging down. And then after that, it cuts to some wordage saying that they found her at the base of Talking Rock. It's like she tried to climb up there but fell. So it's other accounts of it say that she didn't fall; she killed herself. But what do you think about the ending for that character and how that's resolved? Obviously, it's a little disappointing that you don't see it and it's just said in
it is
text form. But
yeah, it is disappointing because for the most part, this Sarah's character is seen as maybe the main character, even though she disappears for a good chunk of the second act. The bad thing about her character is, even though she's sort of rebellious at the beginning because she's a poet and she's not part of the in crowd and all that type of stuff, she's never had any type of comeuppance in this film at all. She's just shit upon the entire film. And it's
I think she is slightly defended by the French teacher when she finds her tied up in there, with the other teacher. There's a slight defense for her.
But you're kind of waiting for her character to do something even more so rebellious or fight back. But then you get the scene where she seemingly commits suicide, and then all of that is kind of like, well, shit. That's that's a horrible ending for the character itself. But you're also thinking, oh, if this is based on a true story, then that's really what happened. So,
well, I was talking about Appleyard's fate. She has a similar fate.
Sorry, I'm thinking of Sarah.
Yeah. But I mean, I see what you're saying with that, though. That is. But Appleyard has a similar fate where she goes. It says that she climbed up on the mountain, but it's really, I think she committed suicide off of it, jumped off of it. And the question is, maybe she felt guilty from Sarah killing herself, but there's some mystery.
I think Appleyard is a character who has bred the finest women in culture in the 1900s from her school. Her school has this highly great reputation, and the main teacher who used to assist her and make sure that everything fell in line disappeared on that mountain, and she cannot recover. She doesn't know how to relate to her own students. She had a buffer to do all that type of stuff, and when she was forced to do it, it was a lot of pressure. And the only thing that she could think about is monetary. What's going to happen if my school closes down? It becomes a defense mechanism for her to just think about that aspect with complete disregard to all of her students, the education of her students and the well-being of her students. I can't. The one teacher who disappears. What's her name? I can't.
McCraw, Miss McCraw.
Miss McCraw. Miss
Yeah.
McCraw is like that buffer between the
Right.
students and the higher faculty. And without that buffer, Appleyard doesn't know how to react. She doesn't know how to
Right.
respond. And
Plus she's dealing with like the largest tragedy ever,
ever.
and for the school and her life probably, and then pushes Sarah to the limits so far that she kills herself.
Mm-hmm.
But what?
And she feels guilty for it. It's not like she doesn't feel guilty. She feels a little guilt for it. I mean, she knows her school's going to eventually shut her. It's just too much pressure, and too much of the fact that people respond to what media tells them about a place. If someone says, "Oh, this school was responsible for the missing for the missing 3 girls and the teacher who went missing," oh my God, don't send your kids here. I don't think she has a response to recover for something like that.
Yeah, she's definitely she loses it completely. But yeah, I I mean, do you think that's a fitting end for her? Like that type of ending?
I don't know, to be honest with you, because in reality, to be honest with you, I never felt like she was. I think her character's name is Mrs. Trumbull in Matilda. Like, it's not like that. You want her to have a bad ending. I mean, she's hard. She's hard, but to her school, her teachers in her school. But when you see the other girls all together before this incident, they're all happy.
Yeah.
So she's created an atmosphere where all these girls are happy. They're going out to the Hanging Rock for Valentine's Day. They're happy. These are not. You're not seeing a bunch of rebellious girls in the school.
Right. Yeah. It's going pretty good up until then.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I guess it's a tragedy all around. I think it's a tragedy all around.
Yeah. What do you think about the ending not being resolved, saying they never found the girls? And
I was fine with that.
That's the end.
Yeah. I actually like unresolved endings. They tend to let me go back and rewatch them more often and try to figure out clues to possibly try to figure it out if there is a means to figure it out. I think this film lends itself really beautifully to that. I think that knowing the ending from the added ending to the book has changed my ideals of the movie.
Right.
I never
it actually works, and it's in a way because you still have a few questions from that aren't answered. Is it, you don't know if it's evil or if it's good or if they've been ascended to a higher plane, another parallel universe where they're angels. They are Bonalucci angels, like the French teacher says. That's what she says Miranda is, and maybe she is one.
Well, if they were to make another remake or modernize it too much, you probably might have actual angels and monoliths.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, I mean, when you watch it and you rewatch it and you kind of sit down and you take a look at the Sarah character, you take a look at the Appleyard character, you take a look at the French teacher, and everything that happens to these characters, you have to see past some of the tragedy that led to all of this, because before this incident, even Sarah, to an extent, had a decent life at the school. I mean, you're not told that she's financially strapped. You're just told she's an orphan. Pretty much it.
Right.
Because Weir does a good job of hiding all that until later on. So maybe one crazy supernatural incident is just too much for everyone in the film to recover from.
Well, it's interesting that when you talk about Sarah, you had this vision of how you wanted the character to go, but unfortunately, it was written by somebody who you had no control over how it went. But it's just interesting the way that I never even thought about that aspect of Sarah, her turning like that in a way that would flip and turn or lose her mind or do something that that would be outside the boundaries of that type of school breeding, I guess. Like a, yeah, I never thought that would be. I didn't imagine her having a horrible ending like what happens, but I never really thought that she might suddenly become Miranda or whatever, you know.
Well, think of it this way: if they were to remake this again and make it more focused on the Sarah character, the two boys, Albert and what's her face, wouldn't be the ones going back up to the mountain. It'd be Sarah going back up the mountain. That is
Yeah,
that would be her becoming a much more progressive character instead of the character that just sits there and does nothing. I mean, if her character truly was in love with Miranda, she would be the one going up to the mountain and staying at the mountain until she figured out what the fuck was going on. You'd have a different type
yeah.
of story told.
I think that's yeah. I mean, I think that would be a. I mean, obviously they did the miniseries just like the book. I think sometimes when you want to take progressive or not necessarily even progressive, like you want to take your time into that. But I do like the idea though of that, and that's a way to tell a story. You know, you have a character like Sarah and that makes more sense from a narrative standpoint for her to be the more protagonist, but it's not the way that it was written. Like you know, if that makes sense though. I mean, might be more satisfying
Oh yeah.
as an audience member.
Even if she ascended with the other two girls and the
Yeah,
teacher, if she ascends at the very end to wherever the other ones went, you'd still have a much more satisfying ending for that character.
yeah, yeah. I don't necessarily have a problem with the way they ended the character. I think it works in an unexpected way. It's not.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know where they're exactly. It's at the same time. It's like, damn, that really. It is. It bites. You know,
Yeah.
just her dying and then finding out her brother was there the whole time
Well,
and that
that's
she could have had a better life. You know.
yeah, but that's the thing is when you read that title scroll at the very beginning, it tells you that this is based on a true story and this is what happens. You kind of
Yeah.
just take it for this is real life. She probably committed suicide,
Yeah.
everything that happens is logical. Um,
Right.
you know,
And
it's a,
that yeah, and that's like yeah, it seems logical to for the way that it's presented in a way like the guys go back and you suspect the guys, you think that they may have done it until it turns out they didn't. Because you're like, okay, now these are the only suspects, these two guys. That was it. And then the first time you see them in a scene alone, you think they're going to start discussing something notorious or but then it turns out the one kid feels like a connection to Miranda or the other girls, and he feels compelled to go back. He feels like if he goes back, that they'll find him, even though the cops had been over there and they've looked everywhere.
Mhm.
And when he goes back, the other guy, Albert, actually leaves. Like he's like, it's going to get dark. We got to go back. And that was a pretty brazen move for Albert to do. Albert's like the coachman, and Michael's like a kind of almost an aristocrat. So leaving him there was not a very good move for Albert. He could have gotten in a lot of trouble, especially if something really bad had happened to Michael. But then he comes back the next morning and he finds him. But that I like that sequence, and it's kind of interesting because you don't have that many male characters in it, and then suddenly you see some, and then it follows them for part of the movie, maybe 20 minutes of the movie. It's very cool to go back to the Hanging Rock again. It's like it really helps that part of the film move forward some.
Yeah. Oh no, I agree with you. I find them much more interesting characters than the police and their investigation.
Yeah, but the police now the main guy playing that main detective he's pretty good though. I mean, he wasn't like the police detective work was a lot different in that time period too than it is now. But I thought he was pretty natural the way that he was doing it. Now, he wasn't like Sherlock Holmes or something
Oh
like
no.
that, but he's a very natural cop in over his head. Didn't know exactly what to do, but he was questioning. He does some pretty good questioning, and when he's questioning people, he doesn't like bring them back to an office and question them. He goes to different locations, so it's a very interesting sequence. What's weird is when he's questioning Michael. Michael actually he asked him to tell him to describe the girls, and he describes four of them, and he's like, "But you only said there was three."
Mm-hmm.
So it's very suspicious that he doesn't answer the question quite right.
Yeah, well, he described the fourth one as what was the word you used?
He said the little dumpy one.
Dumpy. The
Yeah.
dumpy
But yeah. Let me read these descriptions of all four of them. And it's interesting. The first one he describes as Irma. He says first one was tall and dark. Then there was a little dumpy one. Then the girl with the glasses, who was also blonde. And then the last one was slim and fair, which I guess would be Miranda.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting the order in which he says too.
Oh yeah, that is interesting.
Once you think about Irma first, Miranda last. But I don't know. But I don't know. But I think that's maybe as a device from the script to make you suspect him, make the audience suspect Michael may have something to do with it because he tells the cop something wrong, and then the cop asks him, he questions him, why did you do that? And then but the cop doesn't seem too suspicious, maybe a little bit, but.
Well, I suspect that in 1975, when the film was released, and people were not nearly as familiar with the story, this mystery aspect was big on everyone's mind. For us, I don't think it comes off nearly as, I don't want to say compelling, but I guarantee you that a lot of people back then, when they saw the film for the first time, probably needed those type of things to suspect the two men. So it retains that mystery aspect.
It's actually done pretty good. I do like the way that he describes them, and just the way that he imagines in them. I would have liked for him to describe Miranda differently, but it's which I assume was her slim and fair. It's an odd way of describing her, but I don't know. Anyway.
No, it's interesting, especially when she was the one that captivated him the most.
Right, and he's like saying her name when he gets up to the top of the hanging rock. When he's starting to hear something, he's saying her name over and over again. And she's the last one that looks back at him. And so he kind of feels compelled by that. But, yeah.
Things to think about when we rewatch the movie yet again.
Yeah.
Any other words?
Nah. I think I got through most of my stuff here, but yeah.
I think we did a good thorough look at Picnic at Hanging Rock on this Valentine's Day special. Any other thoughts before we rate the movie?
No, let's go ahead and do it.
All right, for everyone out there, we like to take a little time to rate the movies from one star being bad to 5 stars being amazing, Oscar-worthy material. Where would you place Picnic at Hanging Rock, 1975?
This is probably going to seem a little generous for this film, but I think that the film it is for people who haven't seen it. I think it is a hidden gem in a way, and for those who have, I think it also to me, there's a lot of aspects of it that I think influenced other things, which may have not intentionally, or the filmmakers may not have noticed it or knew that they were being influenced, but especially like Twin Peaks and Blair Witch and things of that nature. But I'm going to give it, I think it's a very poetic film, and I think that Weir captures the novel great. But I'm going to give it 4.5 stars.
Okay, good. I'm going to give it 4 stars. I'm going to try not to do too many of those half stars. It seems to be something I fall back on too much. I do think it's an excellent movie. I think the score is phenomenal, and I thought the cinematography was better when I rewatched it. I think Peter Weir is one of those directors who I absolutely have loved most of his work, and it's the only reason why I went back to watch this film. I'm actually really glad that I did, and that sometimes I find directors that never would have been on my list. I think Master and Commander is the reason why I went back and watched this movie. I think that movie I love so much, and I still love that movie, that I went back and tried to watch all of his previous movies, and I realized I had seen most of them except for like this one and a couple other movies. I was like, oh crap, he's done movies I fucking loved. I just didn't know who he was.
That is weird when you notice stuff like that, but it's
4 stars. I'm going to give this movie. I have not seen it as much as some of his other movies. I've seen Dead Poets Society and Master and Commander probably way more times than I probably should have.
Truman Show is pretty good too, really.
As much as I love Truman Show because it's a brilliant movie, I've only ever seen it twice. I don't go back and watch that one as much as his other movies. Yeah, I don't know why. I love Ed Harris and both Jim Carrey do phenomenal work in that movie. I think I love the movie, but it's not one of those films that I will like. I could put in Master Commander anytime and just enjoy my ass watching that damn movie. I think it's a brilliant freaking movie. Dead Poets Society is one of my favorite movies that depicts those type of closed school atmospheres where you have a bunch of either boy students or girl students, because there are some actually really great movies out there like that as well. But I love the themes in Dead Poets Society. I love
it. Yeah.
You know,
it's like it is kind of similar to this one, like in a way, because it is a boys' school rather than the girls' school. Now, I guess one thing I didn't say about this film too is it has a very dreamlike quality to it.
Yes,
and like she had it as a dream, but it does feel like a dream. It's even the way it's shot almost feels very dreamlike, and it flows in an odd way.
Well, also the way that the editors imprint Miranda's image throughout the film, and so people are just thinking about Miranda all the time, and she's this. And I'm gonna use your term because now you got it in my brain, angelic figure. That shot that just keeps repeating throughout the whole film. I could definitely see that. I could definitely see that. So, with that, thank you, Dave, for this great talk about Picnic at Hanging Rock for this Valentine's Day. We hope that you've enjoyed our conversation. I know this isn't a bloodthirsty, gore-filled horror film, but the way it depicts the missing girls and the supernatural elements definitely lends itself to fans of the horror genre. You can also take movies like Heavenly Creatures in the same vein.
Yeah.
You know, those type of movies.
Also shot in New Zealand. That's New Zealand. This was Australia, but kind of close.
But those type of films sometimes get overlooked. Dead Calm is another one that may not seem a horror film, but definitely hits those marks. We love to talk about all those type of films. They are all part of our genre. We all should watch them and enjoy the different subgenres within the major genre that we all love. So thank you, Dave, for joining us on this conversation of horror. Thank you all for joining the program. If you have never listened to our program before, make sure to check out some of our previous episodes. We have done an amazing array of different types of films from all different genres and time periods. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Leave us some comments on films you would like us to talk about, because we are very hungry for more films that you guys are interested in listening about. So with that, thank you so much for joining us and have a pleasant day. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, written, produced, and directed by Kevin L. Powers, executive producer Kelly A. Inoka. All contents and material from this episode of Conversations in Horror is copyright 2025 Broken Lighthouse Pictures.